So I've been having a conversation with my cousins, I guess, and a few other people online, and then I watched the Michael Monroe or Morio. I forget his last name. The guy that had the discussion with the Weber State University uh, non-debate professor. If you really want to call him a professor, you go right ahead. Really, what he is a sophist that got a cushy job, and now no one can fire him because he's black. And if they do, he'll claim racism and then probably get a settlement. Even though he just lost his job, he'll still be cushy for a while. That's just how this will probably end up working, because everybody that's a leader lately, who happens to also be of the boomer age, is a fucking coward when it comes to this shit. But that's neither here nor there. There was two arguments that this guy put together when I was listening to some of the debate stuff that they were talking about, because they tried to claim a couple things, and I've heard these over and over again. I also found an interesting website, well, I'll do a separate video for, which goes into a book that looks like I'll probably go pick up and read, but I digress. There was two arguments. One is that only white people can be racist. And this is because they have the institutional or societal power because they're the majority. And that power plus prejudice equals racism. Therefore, only white people can be racist because they have the power, and vicariously, because somebody said so, they are prejudiced. They prefer the in-group versus the out-group. This is how it's argued. So I was thinking, well, they redefine racism so it fits into their microcosm, two-dimensional, weak-ass thinking framework. It's also called black and white sophistry, which is ironic because that's what they're talking about, black people versus white people. The irony is not lost on me. Ha ha ha, it is great. C'est la vie. This is what it is. So they think in two dimensions. They can't see anything else but two dimensions. There is no nuance to them, and they will argue till they're blue in the face because they have to be right. If they're not right, that means they've been a liar this whole fucking time, and it means their entire worldview, which is based on them being, oh, poor pity me, I have all the power, go fuck yourself, but I'm also a victim, so yes, give me money. It would all come crashing down. They'd be shown as the charlatans and frauds that they are. So I was thinking, how can you argue against this? Because regular logic doesn't work. The fact that they use sophistry and two-dimensional thinkings shows that they are unable to reason, and using knowledge and facts will not work. And it's obvious it's not working because this debate has been going on for 20 years now, and it's just back and forth every single time. They got their points, we got ours, and it's one-upmanship. It's just pissing contest. But the greatest thing about philosophy in general, and the way they argue using sophistry, is that you can use their own tools against them, forcing them to use their own logical devices, their two-dimensional pathetic thinking, against them in the same framework. Let me give you an example. So, when they're saying that whites have all the power, well, you can demonstrate that no, whites do not have all the power. We don't. There have been many institutions, laws, and everything else that do not favor white people. In fact, that strips us of all societal power. We don't get to choose, and we don't get to say who we can and cannot hire. There has to be equal representation and treatment. We're not allowed to discriminate, thus use prejudice, in hiring practices. The EEOC prevents you from doing so. To do so is illegal. That is a stripping of power. We do not have that power. But who gets that power? If it's a two-dimensional thinking, clearly if the power is removed from one, it must be given to the other. Therefore, the minorities in this case, through the benefits of the EEOC, have the power. So too does not the equal opportunity, but the equal opportunity lending has this also too. The affirmative action to get into college and whatnot, same thing. It does not benefit white people. White people are the majority. We do not get the societal benefits that this is aligned to. So in that case, we have no power in this situation. Therefore, the power must be transferred to those that are receiving said power, because power can only flow in two ways, and there's only a black and white two-dimensional thinking to this. Therefore, if the power is stripped from us, it is given to the minorities. They now have the power to dictate terms. To say that because people receive different scores on SATs, we should get a lower score threshold, thus allowing more of us into college versus the white people, just as an example. But then I was thinking, okay, there's some examples we could use of this. We can't argue ourselves out of jail because we're white. That doesn't work. In fact, it's been demonstrated that actually gets you in jail quicker for being a racist prick. You cannot get special treatments in the stores based on your skin, meaning that somebody's not going to kiss your ass and say, I'm white, you better give me what the hell I want. In fact, the opposite reaction is often true. Once you bring up race as if you're a proud white person and that you should get preferential treatment, you do not, in fact, get preferential treatment. In fact, you're usually asked to leave because nobody likes white supremacy. In fact, the opposite is true. If you're a black person and saying, are you picking on me because I'm black? You think I don't get it? You better give me my free shit right now. Guess what happens? This was demonstrated by Hotep Jesus. He went into a Starbucks and said, I heard y'all a bunch of racist motherfuckers. Where's my free coffee? They gave him a free coffee. Right then and there. And then he got on Fox News right after because he pulled this stuff. And he was just messing with them, but they complied. He was the oppressor. The white lady behind the counter was the oppressed. He used his societal privilege plus his prejudice and power to get exactly what he wanted, using oppression through violence. Because words are violence, and that's all he used was his words. Calling this lady a racist, saying the place she worked for was racist, using the societal pressures and the taboo words of racism as a method and a tool of violence to get his oppression over the white person. So, if you can demonstrate that they indeed have societal power, how does that work? Because what they also claim is whiteness is perceived by those that are not white. I can't know what whiteness is because I'm white, but I need to apologize for whiteness because I'm white. That makes no sense in a normal terms. But let's continue down this thought because I kind of branched it out into a three-step kind of logical deductive reasoning, similar to the way sophists kind of bridge the gaps, like the God of the gaps arguments and shit like that, and the teleological argument and all that shit from atheism. This is the same way they reason. Whiteness is then projected onto those believed to be white as an oppressive force through language, meaning that you are my oppressor, but I'm not allowing you to oppress me. You have a institutionalized power that I perceive as oppressive to me, but I will not allow it to oppress me, meaning that, in fact, it is not an oppressive power. Therefore, in their whiteness, is a systemic power because the systems require the two-dimensional power structure. What they're trying to do is to strip white people of structural power and transfer said power to them. They successfully do this through a equivalent exchange. You do not have power anymore because I have power over you, thus making them the racists. Meaning all black people are now racists because they have the same thing. If you were to counter whiteness into blackness, blackness is getting preferential treatment based on the color of their skin. Blackness is perceived by those who are not black, meaning that you do not know what it's like to have blackness. I, as a white person, perceive blackness and their benefits that they get. Blackness is then projected through societal control where one can use their own skin color to gain preferential treatment, creating a power in the two-dimensional power struggle. Meaning that they can use the color of their skin to get literally whatever the hell they want. EEOC, affirmative action, reparations, which is people pushing for lately, and a whole host of other things just because they can. They can even get people fired if they so choose to use said power. So the blackness manifests through use of societal pressures, which demonstrates only black people can be racist. They have a control. And it can be manifest through, since they like to bring up historical oppression. Well, let's demonstrate how historical oppression proves that minorities always have the power and always exert oppression and societal control. For example, historical minorities have always dominated the majorities in every society. Always. That is always how it's been. Monarchs is an elite special group, usually familial related. I hope I said that right. Basically, aunts, uncles, cousins, brothers, you're related to the monarch in some way. Therefore, you have institutional power through that of the monarchy over the masses that live on your land. Society did not dominate the monarchs. The monarchs had a lot of land. Those living around that land reported to the monarch and paid taxes to that monarch. If they decided to be tyrants, so be it. But tyrants would be overthrown because nobody likes the tyranny of the minority. And in those cases, they're replaced by another monarch, usually. Most recent example for that, why not? We'll fuck with Godwin's law again. The Nazi Party was the minority, and they tried to exert power all over Europe. Well, nobody likes tyranny. The Nazis got their ass handed to them, and they were replaced with the European Union. And yet the Germans are still in control. Government leadership is a minority body meant to serve the masses, to which they are voted in with to their leadership. The minority, in this case, is government officials. They are a minority subset compared to the majority. Not everybody can be a clerk. Nobody's going to be a clerk, but we all use them. There's only one mayor. There's not a community of mayors, right? There's only one governor. There's only one there's a couple congressmen. There's only one president. It's always a singular digit to the top tier leadership. There may be committees. There may be a general body. For example, the Senate and the House, I think there's like 400 or 500 people in there out of 314 million in the country. They are the minority, and they are the ones that have power over the majority. This is the case of every other society across the world. There is a minority government that controls the majority. The minorities always have the power. If it's historically normal for a minority to have the power, it would also be asserted that they can assert authority over the majority whenever they see fit. And they can do it through oppressive language or actual violence. So how many times have you seen this in our system? And I put a little bit further note in here because I wanted to tie this into something else a little bit. And that's the oppression is the use of force and control to group. Force or violence, right? Actual violence, or they think words are violence. So we'll use that as well. So since minorities have always been the group that controls everything and what they can do and can't do, there is a word that white people cannot say. Because black people say we cannot say it. If we do say it, we are met with public scorn, which is oppression, and especially if it's recorded. So if our face is out there, we will be drawn over the coals. Flagellation usually ensues if we said some words that somebody didn't like. Cancel culture is a manifestation of the assertion of the minorities over power of the majority. We have a group of people that can literally come up and say, well, you said this thing 15 years ago. We don't like it. Therefore, you're a bigot, racist, homophobe, xenophobe, whatever. Fuck you. Apologize and flagellate yourself. This is oppression of the minority over the majority. In this case, they're oppressing a minority over another minority in usual cases because it's a mob over a single person, like a witch hunt. But it's the minority that think like this over the majority that do not, which is why people apologize, because they're like, I didn't do anything wrong, I'm sorry. That's a half-assed apology, really, but that's okay. Because they have now admitted to their sin, their guilt, their use of oppressive force, or perceived oppressive force, while the person that is actually using oppressive force is now controlling the situation and has this person is now oppressed by those that have the control. Control is now transferred to those that thought they were oppressed by this word. They may receive further violence or oppression by rest of society. Basically, you become a scarlet letter. You're now a racist because you use the N-word. And that's the end of it. You're untouchable. You can get fired. You don't exist anymore. You can get fired from your job. You can be released from duty. You can have your family and friends no longer talk to you. You'll never get another job again because now it's public to everyone that you said the N-word one time. That one time that you said it. If it's just once. So, all this oppression with the use of one word. If you want to claim that that is not power, you must then assume that I can say that word because it has no power. If that word has no power, then I can say the word, can I not? But if it does have power and you're using it to oppress me, I cannot say that word because there's societal ramifications for using said word. Meaning that those that can use the word and do so a shit ton in all their music, social conversations, all over the damn place. I hear it a lot, especially in the South. I gotta tell you, I hear it a shit ton down here. And that being the case, only one race is not allowed to use said word. To do so brings violence toward that individual. This is manifest oppression through systemic use and institutional control over racism. This is now institutional racism because you're using societal power plus your prejudice against the whiteness to assert oppression over white people. In your same logic, you're now the only people that can be racist because you have societal power and control. So if you were to use the operational control of this this word in particular, you now have systemic and integrated race control and power in multiple cultures and society, puts the power directly in the minorities, and since you are now the oppressor, because power plus prejudice or privilege is how racism is defined, only black people can be racist because they have societal control over what people can and can't say. The ultimate control of thought. I thought this would be kind of a fun thought experiment. Tell me what you think about it. Because I've been fighting around, like, how can we argue with these dumb shits if we're speaking two different languages? Some of us are using a different definition. Some of us are actually arguing from a position where we don't use sophistry because it is illogical. And they're using sophistry because they rely upon it. It's the only way their shit makes sense. And their shit don't stink. In which case, we should use the same thing against them. It makes no goddamn sense, but you're basically turning the argument on its head and flipping it to be also true. Not doing the true-false test, if you will, to say if the opposite is also true, then it must be a true thing. More to say the opposite is true because your side said it's true. This is the same operational stuff that I see when you go and look at studies as well. Like the resume study, for example, they wanted to prove that there's prejudice in hiring. So what they did was they did a bunch of resumes to prove this is a racist thing. They wanted to prove racism, so they found a way to prove it. And what they didn't prove was racism. They proved bias, maybe. That You know, it depends on what businesses they were targeting and whatnot. But in actuality, they didn't actually test racism. They just proved their own point. That's a subject matter for a different time, and it comes down to how I hate these polls, and I hate when anybody says a study says, and it comes down to a root thing to that. But I digress for now. I wanted to leave this little thought experiment out there for the whiteness and power plus privilege. If they're to claim the same thing, then truly, then I can spin it, because historically, the minorities have always been in charge. You, in the minority, have control over what I can and cannot say through the use of one word. Well, not just that one word. There's a host of other things I can't say, too. Nor am I allowed to argue against any of this because I'm white or some shit, too. Thus making you the oppressors. Vicariously. You are now oppressing me. How does that not make you racist in that case? Because now you're using a prejudice plus power. You're using your power to assert your prejudice over me. Because I'm white and you believe whiteness is an existent force. Thus, you're now oppressing me, making you the oppressor, thus making you racist. This two-dimensional dynamic thinking always falls on its head because both sides are equally true depending on what your frame of reference is. Because they can never perceive my experience, because they're not allowed to. But then, they can always project their experience upon me. It's fully allowed. Thus oppressing me again. It's an easy power dynamic to demonstrate you have all the power in this situation. No matter what I say or what I do, you're not going to believe me. No matter what I say or what I do, I'm always wrong. You are now oppressing me. If I'm not allowed to say or speak anything, you are now the oppressor. You are now racist. And this is by your own logic. So there's an easy way to, argue against these people, and that's using their own logic against them. You just have to roll it down the same thought process. Most people find it uncomfortable to follow the same thought process, but at the same time, it's really not all that difficult because they're two-dimensional thinkers. They don't perceive nuance. They cannot understand facts and logic. Objective reality doesn't even exist to these fucking people. To give you any idea how backwards it is, it's very primitive two-dimensional thinking. And it's easy to overcome, and it's easy to use against them because the two dimensions can easily be reversed. If it's only two-dimensional and there's no room for nuance, someone has the power, someone does not. If that power transfers at any point in time, now they are the ones that they point at everything and claim that that's what they are. So in the case of racism, as I've just outlined, if they take the power away from me at any given point in time, if they're giving me agency and power and assertion that I have all the power in this system, if that power is at any time removed, they must necessarily therefore have the power, making them the oppressors. Therefore, they are the prejudice plus power, thus racist. Hope you enjoyed this video. It's a little bit bizarro logic, but I thought you might enjoy it because I'm able to see this pattern, and it's really not that hard to kind of flip it around. Little bit interesting. I'm going to try it with a few of the other arguments that they have out there. But in the next few videos, I got a couple of the cool ideas. So I'll see you next time.
How dare you challenge me with your so-called kung fu? You don't have a chance.